Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by none other than Jessie Ma. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Love having you on here to follow up your sister, Christy, who was on here a long time ago at this point now. But we'll kind of touch on some of the similarities that you two have both followed in your academic and career path a little bit later on. But to give a bit of introduction on you, you graduated from PET in 2011. You then went on to study at McGill. You studied political sciences and sociology, and you've done further certificates, diplomas in French and international business. You've had multiple positions, including at the US Department of State, RBC, and now you're currently working at the Ontario Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training, and Skills. Okay, just making sure I got all that right. So I guess
Yeah, it's a
starting,
handful.
yeah. Did you go to Stonebridge as well?
No, I
Uh,
actually went to PET as like a new transfer.
okay.
Like my parents moved after
Oh,
elementary school, so
okay.
I didn't end up going to the school that like all
Oh,
my
okay.
friends went to, so I was new to
Mhm.
PET.
Okay, okay. So kind of touching on that, I guess, like, being a new student at PET, not really knowing anyone from elementary school, how would you describe, the first experience at PET? Was it a welcoming experience or was it kind of a culture shock for you?
It was a little scary. Like I think it's very intimidating, right? When you're someone like who's younger and you don't have friends, because like friends mean like the world at that age. Like I think you kind of just have to kind of put yourself out there because I feel like people are friendly, but they just stick to their groups because like that's how they tend to be. So you really have to like, I guess, try to just like make friends and just find people that you share similar interests with, just kind of like in any environment.
Yeah, to find people with similar interests as you, did you join, any clubs, extracurriculars?
Yeah, I joined music. So I was in band for 4 years. I think that really shaped a big part of like my friend circle and just like my time after school. A lot would be on band practice, or there was also morning practice, or there was like just regular lunch practice. I think we got to spend a lot of time together with all like my music friends. I also joined um like other random clubs like there was also the leadership camps that I did for a bit, and then I it felt so long ago. Like what did I do? Oh, I also joined prom committee because I liked planning events, so I was like chair of that as well. But honestly, I feel like people should just join whatever they want. Like I know there's always like people always say, oh, like there's like certain things you should join for like university, but I like I understand that, but I feel like people should just join the things that like make them happy because you're gonna develop the skills that will be useful in the future, even though it doesn't feel like that, but it's gonna come back into place. I feel like people should do what they like and align it, but not necessarily just try to fill a resume because you just don't want to be miserable at the end, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that kind of gets lost, especially at a competitive school like PET, right? Everyone just wants to,
Yeah,
pad their resume, but I think, yeah, those skills you pick up along the way are great. What instrument did you play in band?
I played the flute
Okay, very
for four
cool.
years. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
we hear
typical.
about rep very often on the podcast.
Yeah, yeah,
The 7 a.m. practices, the trips to competitions, things like that.
yeah.
Um, Definitely a very popular activity at PET and something that
Hmm.
I assume creates like some kind of community. We mentioned a lot of the teachers on here
Hmm.
who are great leaders and things like that. But more so on the inside of the classroom, were there any classes that stood out to you during your time at PET?
Yeah, I was always an arts girly, like whether it was the writing or like the history or like law or philosophy, like I tended to fare better in those classes and I liked it better. Math I took throughout the years just because I felt like I if I didn't, like I would be losing out on something, but I wasn't that great at it anyways. It was just kind of one of those things instead of having a free period, let me just go and learn like what I could there. Um, but and then sciences I dropped after grade 11 because I really wasn't interested and I was just like I just filled it up with all my arts
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
math here and there. So,
Yeah, it's definitely a common sentiment we hear, figuring out what you like, what you're good at, and
hmm,
hopefully those two things kind of align, right? And I guess for
yeah.
you, it really did, right? And you decided to study political science and sociology after high school. When did that specific program kind of come into the picture for you?
So So, okay, just to backtrack. So in grade 10 or was it grade 11, there was this like free French program. It's called Explore, and I encourage everyone to go try it out if you want to learn a new language and you live in Quebec for 6 weeks. And then it was in those 6 weeks that one of the our excursions was going to a tour campus of McGill, and then that was the first time like I saw the campus and I thought, oh, it looked really pretty. Like it just looks like a very welcoming and inclusive place. And I think from then I had like set my mind that I wanted to go to McGill as like my top choice for university. In terms of poli sci and sociology, I knew I wanted to do something writing related, and originally I thought I was going to like grow up and be like a lawyer. So I thought, you know what, like this degree felt like a in towards like getting into law school. So and I feel like a lot of people still think that. So anyway, so I did that because I thought I liked writing, I'm good at it, so let me kind of just pursue this.
So did the distance kind of scare you at first, or were you trying to get as far as away from Markham as possible?
Um, I mean, I only knew like I think two people who went to that school, but they weren't. Oh, actually, sorry, one person from Pet One, and then two others I had met from my French program. So I think it's like sometimes it's scary because you're also in a new place. I feel like if you go to the universities in Waterloo, you're bound to bump into people you know, so it doesn't seem so foreign. But I don't know. I always felt like I felt like, I moved schools when I was younger pretty frequently in elementary, and then I moved again for high school and then again for university. So I felt like it's kind of like a time I feel like I'm just like reinventing myself. Like I get to meet new friends, I get to kind of just do whatever I want. Not that you can if you have friends, but I'm just saying it kind of pushes you to really like rethink the things you want and kind of just to put yourself back in whatever path you want to create for yourself for the next few years. So I encourage it for people who like the environment. I feel like where you study is important. You don't want to not enjoy the environment because school studying is important, but so is that culture of like the school that you want. So I feel like it wasn't so much the distance. I just really liked the campus that I visited. So
Right. I think that's a useful piece of advice because I came to Western sight unseen. I didn't know what I was getting into. So I would definitely recommend visiting the campus, getting a strong feel for the culture.
hmm
And
hmm
speaking of that culture, I guess you had like a little bit of interaction just being on the campus, but when you actually started like going to class and meeting new people,
hmm
was there a culture shock for you?
So I guess what's unique about McGill is we meet a lot of people also like from Quebec and France who are mostly French speaking. So you can hand in all your assignments in English or French. So it's like very accommodating in terms of language. Culture, it's like it's very academic, but there's also a really vibrant like student life, like a lot of parties happening, a lot of like different types of committees. So I feel like it's a pretty good environment. I feel like if you're someone who wants one or both. For me, I wanted both. Like I feel like the academic was important, but so is just like my social life to meet new people, to, go party on the weekends, relax. Like, so I felt like for me, the balance was really important. So I don't think I could be at a school that is just too focused on like one of them. Not, but I feel like a lot of universities now have a good balance. But like, I just really loved like the culture. It just felt really like European and just people were very international. So I loved just meeting classmates from like different places.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like, it's a great experience there. I don't know if I've had anyone from McGill on the podcast so far. So it's interesting
Oh,
to
okay.
definitely hear that perspective. I visited there once, never took a class or
Mhm.
anything, but I guess you kind of spoke on, some other universities that we may or may not name that might be too focused on, one aspect or another. Were there any other universities you're kind of considering along the way as well?
Yeah. So I applied to University of Toronto, Waterloo, Western, and Queens, I believe. But to be fair though, like I do feel like the school experience is whatever you make of it. So I understand that some schools might have a certain reputation for being like one way, but I feel like it's really up to the person to carve out what they want because the things you want will be there. You just have to find it. So I feel like at the end of the day, if it's a certain program or if it's a certain school that you like, it's okay. Go there. You're gonna find, certain clubs you want to do. You're gonna find the academic like friends that you want to like, you know, just learn from. So I feel like sometimes like there's a lot of stigma with like certain schools or what you want, but I feel like you just have to like pave the way that you want. Like it's not going to be handed down on you. Like if you want to join certain clubs, just go find it and just join. Like it's probably easier said than done, but sometimes it just takes that little push to step out of that comfort zone, and then you'll realize that everything you want is there. You just have to grab it.
Yeah, I think so. Like an undertone of what we've been talking about so far. You mentioned like the clubs in high school, right? Going out,
Hmm.
finding people who have similar interests, and then like kind of challenging yourself to step into a new environment and
Hmm.
at McGill, right? So I think that's
Hmm.
an undertone so far that I've kind of been sensing. And so we had your sister on a while ago on the podcast,
Yeah.
and she also decided to study sociology, but she took a bit of a different route, stayed in Toronto at U of
Hmm.
T. Do you feel like you had any influence on her decision to study social science? I know like a lot of siblings, they might want to follow their older sibling. Was that kind of the dynamic?
So my parents have always been really supportive, so thank goodness of just whatever we want to do. But I think my sister and I both just was better at the arts than we were at like the maths and sciences, and that's where our passion was. So I think, and my sister was really good with like writing. She's always also really good at like being like very logical about like how she writes things. So I feel like she wanted to study sociology because it was interesting to her, just understanding like people. Um, and then yeah, so I feel like we talk about a lot of things together, but we ultimately like kind of just cheer each other on regardless of what path, because I always say there's always going to be something like for you at the end of the roads. I think the most important is doing something that you'll enjoy
Hmm.
and
And
then pursuing that.
yeah, were there ever conversations about her going to McGill? Did you try to convince her, like say this is such a great program, you should go there as well?
Yeah, I think growing up, like
Yeah.
she's visited my school and she's attended some classes with me back then. But I think just in terms of there were some other, I guess, factors at play just with like just at home, like with just different dynamics. And then so ultimately she decided at U of T, and she also got into a really like, prestigious program and continued schooling there. So I think McGill was definitely an option for her, but there were just some external factors that happened to kind of sway to U of T in that
Hmm.
sense for
Yeah, I
her.
think a lot of people, they really like cherish and prize, their older siblings. They might want to say, I want to be just like them, and go like my older brother also studied business. So not saying that I copied him, but it's helpful to have someone who's gone through that experience. I guess you can talk about the dinner table sometimes if you really need. Um, but
Hmm.
kind of moving on, I saw you did further education at McGill after
Hmm.
graduating, right, in French and
Hmm.
international business. Like
Hmm.
what made further education so important to you? At like what point did you realize that you needed to like go back into the classroom?
So I think I mentioned I originally wanted to study law. So I worked a few summers in university at like a law firm as like a summer student, but I ended up working on more business cases because the law student, um, sorry, like the business student left, and then so I was kind of just helping to fill in. And I think in that environment, I first understood how the law world works and like the office hours and just the type of, I guess, like work that they have to do. And then when I encountered business, I thought this is so interesting. I feel like you get to touch on a lot of different things. And then so it got me thinking if I still really wanted to pursue law. So I feel like sometimes it's good to go into an environment that you feel like you want to spend their next like 40 years in. And then you might realize, I'm not sure. Like I just felt like it was something that I could do. But I wasn't sure if I'd be happy doing for like 30, 40 years of my life, whether it was the hours, just like certain ways the system would work and just like different work-life balance that would be needed. I felt like I don't know, like I could do it, but would I be happy? I don't know. I don't think so. So then I took a step back and I was like, now what do I do? Like I felt like I studied my whole life with this vision that I was going to be a lawyer. And now I'm here and I'm like, maybe I don't want to be a lawyer. So I was like, what do I do? So I'm like, so in my lost state of mind, I was like, okay, maybe I should just pursue further education and study business because business was so interesting to me, but I never got to take business classes because they were mostly reserved for business students. And the other spots are always snatched so quickly. So I didn't even get to take one business class. And I was like, how useful would it be to just learn what business is about? But I couldn't enroll in business right away because I had to take some prereq courses in my like post grad program. So I'm like, okay, I should improve my French. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me sign up for this French program so I can improve French and then do my prerequisite courses for my business program. And then that way I can get into business. So was it super planned out? No. but I guess it worked out is how that kind of played because I felt like I just wanted to spend a little bit more time figuring out what I wanted to do. And business was interesting. So I thought, let's take some business courses and see how it goes. So that's
So
kind of how
yeah,
that played out.
I was gonna say that sounds very intentional. Going back to, you visiting the McGill campus, having that first-hand experience, knowing you want to go there, but then I guess, some experiences it kind of makes you realize I don't want to do this, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
guess it's a mixture of both. And then so you found, a passion for business. And then
Mm-hmm.
I saw you work for RBC, right? The biggest bank in Canada, which is I'm going to assume a lot different than working for the ministry, right? One is I'm guessing like the stereotype from what I've heard is like public is very I would call it like slower, laid back, whereas like
Mm-hmm.
working a private one is cutthroat. I guess I would call it. Is that
Mm-hmm.
how you'd kind of characterize the difference?
Um, so yes. So well, okay. So I guess there are differences, but sometimes I feel like the differences aren't as stark as people make it seem. Um, the things that I think are the same is the fact that I think the work culture is just determined by management. So I think whether at any private company or the public company, depending on who's at the top, they determine how transparent and how collaborative the teams are. So I feel like this is something that depending on the type of manager and senior management you have, could be the same or different in both the private and public sector. So sometimes it's also a game of luck to see which team you end up on and see if you jive with that culture. So I think that is something that is standard across. It's team dependent. And another thing is there is a stereotype that like government is slower. In a sense, yes, because it's very bureaucratic and there's a lot of different procedures to make things happen. But at the same time, they're also necessary because we're spending, everyone's tax money. So we can't just be like, throwing projects around and doing whatever we want. So I feel like um, at the end of the day, private is, I think, generally more like people feel like it's more cutthroat, maybe because it's like the way that it works feels like if you don't deliver results, like you're gone. But I think that's just the nature of how it is for like for profit businesses. But government, I think it's still fast paced depending on where you're working. So I think some ministries, if it's not the priority of the government for those few years, maybe you're not getting that much attention. But if you're in a priority that is always kind of there's always evolving like education or like where immigration or even like health, I feel like there's always things happening. It tends to be a faster environment, so you could still find a fast environment within the government. You'll just have to go through certain bureaucracies to get things done, which I still noticed happen at RBC though, because you still have to go through different levels to push things forward.
Those are both, very highly established, companies. It's not like you're working at a startup, for example. Like that would be, very, very a smaller degree of processes that you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I saw you did an internship with the U.S. Department of State, right, before you
mm-hmm.
went to RBC. So you've kind of gone public, private, and then back to public, right? Um,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me asking, like, what's kind of been the perspective you're trying to take with those moves? Like, what were you looking for in particular, I guess?
So I so remember how I was talking about my post-grad program in international business. So I would have school at the nighttime. So sometimes during the day, I'm studying, or there was this internship that popped up at the U.S. Consulate in Montreal, where they were hiring like interns. You don't get paid, but you get to kind of just be an intern for a few months. So I applied. Did the interview, got in, and ended up having to wait for my security screening. That was about half a year or like a year delayed because I guess they're very strict with like security background checks. And ended up going and working there for about 4 months in international trade. So I think that was my first exposure to the public sector. And honestly, I was just kind of there to learn. I just wanted to see what it was like to finally be like in a workplace and see people working like and it's kind of like in the public sector. Really enjoyed it. Took on some cool projects, but they didn't allow for interns to stay. I would have really loved to stay, but they needed like a new cohort. It's like an opportunity where people just like kind of experience it and then you're kind of like, hey, goodbye. So I did that. And then I came back home and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, to be honest. But like my friend was like, oh, like I work at RBC and we're hiring. You should look at, some jobs here. And I'm like, oh, no, like I suck at math. I'm not good at it. Like, why would I want to go into finance? Anyway, so so I ended up working at RBC, and I feel like it's funny because some things just happen by chance. And I was working in trade settlement, and also with like IPO. So it was definitely a high priority, fast type of environment, high pressure, high stress, but it was so rewarding. Like I feel like I learned so much from my 3.5 years there that I was like, this is really great, but I don't love the work. Um, like there were two options for me. Either you stay and you just kind of go through the ranks like everyone else does, or you leave and find something else. And I felt like I didn't love, like I wasn't passionate about the work. And I was like, but I wouldn't be happy even if I continued moving up the ranks. Like, is this just what I want for the rest of my life? And then I'm like, no. So then I was like, okay. So I looked for job postings and I saw the Ontario government had a lot of different openings. And then this one was specifically back then for my previous role, it was about the entrepreneur stream and, just assessing applications for entrepreneurs who want to come and start a business in Ontario and kind of grow Ontario's economy. I'm like, that is interesting. I applied, went through the process, and then ended up also getting a position there. So to be honest, none of it was really intentional or where I thought I was going to be. It just happened at a chance where I feel like I was looking for something and I applied, and my previous experience, although feels super unrelated, helped me land those roles. So I feel like that's why I mentioned that sometimes I get the intentional part, but sometimes you could still build yourself up without knowing where you want to go because those skills will come maybe
Yeah.
at times when you don't expect it to.
I think that's great advice for those who are still trying to figure it out, right? I think a lot of people think they have to have the next 40 years figured out, but there's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to make small steps as well, right? So I'm kind of curious, like right now, or before when you first joined the ministry, you mentioned that your like clients were entrepreneurs, right? Like you were trying to help
Mm-hmm.
them,
Mm-hmm.
even though they weren't like paying for it, if you know what I mean. Like I don't want to call them clients in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But before, when you're working for TD doing trade transactions and IPOs, these are huge corporations that were your clients, right? Is there kind of a difference in how you approach it? Like, one is like supporting, like I would call them real people as entrepreneurs versus corporations. Like, was there kind of a difference?
Uh, I guess RBC, it was just the type of work was very numbers focused and a little bit just based on like just ensuring every transaction goes smoothly. So it at one point it became slightly more repetitive once you got the hang of it. But like it was still stressful, but I think the stress decreases the more you get familiar with it, just like any new job. But with, I guess, government in terms of the entrepreneur files, I enjoyed the fact that every file could be about a different business. So you're looking at business owners and entrepreneurs from around the world who are like, I want to bring my business idea to Ontario. So sometimes you'll get people who want to start out, like a motor factory. Someone tried and wanted to set up a new clear plant. That obviously did not happen, did not pass our application process. But you have such cool business ideas, and you get to interview these people and just understand where they're coming from, what they want to help Ontario with. So I felt like that to me was interesting because I felt like I love the writing part. So sometimes with numbers at RBC, I'm like, what am I doing? Like looking at numbers all day. But here I'm like, oh, this is great. I look at words all day. So I feel like just in terms of what I just wanted to do something different, I guess. I felt like I had a lot of different skills and RBC helped me shape some of them, but there were still other ones I was hoping to kind of like improve on. And I feel like with this type of role, I was able to improve and use all the skills that I didn't get to use at RBC.
Right. So again, that sounds, very intentional, looking for more ways to expand and gain new skills,
Mm-hmm.
work with different people. Yeah, those are all things I hear, from that story for sure. When assessing, let's say, an entrepreneurial, proposal, do you value the
Mm-hmm.
person more or do you value the project more? Or like how do you balance the two?
Both. Like we have a list of criteria that we go through in terms of evaluating a person, like your previous experience, like what kind of companies have you owned, like what challenges and like what kind of achievements have you had with them, but also just the business idea, especially if you're opening a business in a rural area or opening certain businesses that are in demand. Those are more highly scored just because these are things that Ontario needs. So I would say it's a good balance of both. And the interview also reflects that. Like, how are they in person? Like, how are their skills? So I think it's a good way to see like success. I think it's kind of like half half. Like, previous experience dictates some, but also like, what's your plan? Like, is it viable?
Yeah. Right.
for Ontario, which is a
Yeah.
whole different country than what a lot of people may imagine because they've never been, or they've been and they come to vacation, but it's very different type of business environment. Just even the business culture, the way you do business, you know,
Right.
it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're combining like your financial expertise from your time in the private sector, but also like your general like business culture knowledge from other experiences as well. So it sounds like a good combination of those two. And I think we were talking offline. You're kind of transitioning into a new role, or like it's another role on top of what you're doing. Can you kind of tell us about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I think another distinction between the private sector and government, at least the Ontario government, is that the private sector is like, you have one role, right? If you want to do something else, you resign and you apply for something else. But in the government, once you become a permanent staff member, a lot of the time you're able to have that permanent spot as your home position. So this is your home base, whatever it is, you can always come back, but you can leverage opportunities to do contracts in other roles. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm on a like a 9 month contract type thing where I'm doing program development for other programs, but I have my home position is still, what I had before. So I think what I really love about the government is the ability to kind of venture to try different things while having a security of that home position. Because I feel like when I heard about this when I first joined, I was so confused. I was like, what do you mean I have this role? I have that role. But I think that's a very valuable asset is to have a security of a role and be able to utilize like that opportunity to like take other contracts and then you can always go back to your home position. So
Mhm.
everyone's always moving around. That's why you see vacancies from a few months to like a year or even longer because sometimes like people are going off to do something else and then you have to find other people to fill the role. So I know it seems messy, but if people have questions, we can talk
Yeah.
about that. But it's just something a little bit more unique, I think, to government is having a secure home position and then taking on contracts
Mhm.
and then you can still go back to the home position when you need or when you want to. Like there
Yeah.
is restrictions, but overall that's kind of
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the intentionality thing and having that firsthand experience and trying a bunch of different things, seeing which shoes fit, as I would say, trying
Mm-hmm.
them on for size, seeing what you like, things like that. And I guess, as you're kind of exploring different areas within the ministry, what are some future aspirations that you have, whether it be professionally, maybe going back to school, starting your own store, starting your own company one day, traveling, volunteering, anything like that?
So traveling is a big part of, I feel like, my life, just like a lot of family travels and just to go explore different places. So I think that will continue to be my current and future aspirations. Um, I would also continue like to keep exploring different roles within the government, whether it's different ministries or different branches. I feel like there's so many roles that I don't know about that I feel like could be really interesting. So I feel like that is something I want to like take advantage of. And I guess personal life is just trying to get a really good like work life balance, which luckily I feel like that's another thing is a lot of people transition from private to public thinking that they are able to kind of balance better. And I think that's certainly the case, especially in certain areas. Not that, private sector you can't, but I feel like you just have to be intentional, whether it's private or public, to find those type of jobs in those areas if that's what you're looking for. So I feel like the work life balance is important to me. Just have time to like recuperate and relax after the day, have time to socialize because I feel like I'm not someone who can just concentrate on one thing. Like I love doing different things. So knowing me, like the work life balance is something that I'll continuously like strive for and make sure that I'm like getting a dose of
Mhm.
every day.
Right. So it's great to hear that you're in a position where you can travel, you can meet different people, have different kind of proposals come up, use your business knowledge, financial analysis, things like that. But if you were to go back and let's say talk to your 17 or 18-year-old self, what would be the advice that you would give yourself?
It's the idea that like you don't need to have everything figured out. Like it's okay to just like kind of play it by ear because at the end of the day everything will work out. I feel like you'll never lose the skills that you accumulate, but sometimes it just feels like it's not useful for that certain situation. So I feel like just do what you want and be good at it. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing else. Like, you don't have to compare yourself to anyone. You don't have to kind of work towards this ultimate goal that you feel like you want in 40 years, just enjoy the process and enjoy just learning the different things. Things you don't like, just don't bother doing. Don't even feel like you have to do it just for the sake of making other people happy. Like you'll like if you're good at what you do and you build the skills that you want, like you'll be able to flourish and find ways to kind of build on that and find positions that are right for you. So at the end of the day, I don't even know if this is good advice, but just like do what you want and just don't doubt yourself.
Yeah, I think you touched on a key point earlier about, joining clubs for the skills, right? I think you pick up a lot of
Mm-hmm.
skills that, you might not necessarily use like in the immediate future, but you kind of have them in your back pocket. And same with
Mm-hmm.
like your job at RBC, right? Like you didn't necessarily know what your next step was going to be, but you were picking up skills along the way. And they skills that never go out of style, right? You're always going to be able to call back on them and keep using them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's great insights. And we'll wrap up with one more question for you. If you could nominate another PET grad to be on the podcast, who would it be?
Okay, so I'm gonna nominate my good friend from high school, Kenneth Cam. So hopefully he gets to be on next time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. Comparing the private and public sectors, we talked a lot about intentionality and like going out there and finding what's for you, right? You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
how, at any university you can find, the parties if that's what you're into. You can find clubs that you're into, find the friends that you're into. So it's really all about you, going out there and getting it for yourself, right? I think that's the biggest thing I took away. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. Peace out.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.